You now have BlackRock CEO Larry Fink comes out and says, hey, I got an idea for inflation. Let's make everybody come back to work in person. Now, you gotta admit, you gotta give it to that guy, because if you read into what he's saying, he ain't kidding. If you make everybody come back to physically work and they own homes in other states and they gotta put those things back on the market, you talk about running down the price of houses. Hey everybody, Jared Jones. Some news from BlackRock is gonna send shockwaves across the real estate brokers, homeowners, possibly could make a massive dent in the housing economy across many of the states that are actually doing pretty well, which is sad. But let me tell you where it's at. As you've seen recently in the news, there's been a lot of foldback, reversal on remote workers, okay? This is very bad for housing. You gotta remember in 2020 and 2021, there was, depending on the survey you look at, 1 out of 3 people buying in a new marketplace moved out of an old one because they were going to live there because they could sit on the beach and zoom into work remote. This is a problem. You gotta understand, folks, the amount of people in the economy that remote to work is like 30 million, okay? When the last 2 years hit, people were buying their homes on an uphill climb, okay? The prices were getting expensive in the last year or two. Yes, their interest rates were great, but Goldman Sachs, many banks have followed suit, many local employers have followed suit that aren't making headlines and said, hey, you have to come back to work. I've seen estimates that out of the 30 million, 15 million will probably be called back before it's over, maybe more. Now, couple that with the news today, and I think it's going to be much more dramatic than that prediction might even be. And what I'm saying is that if you have a whole bunch of people, multiple millions of people who moved into states far away from where they work, those houses are going to hit the market and there's nobody to buy them. Right now, there's very low inventory, and with no supply, things are getting bad. No homes to purchase, and it's still bad for housing. Long-term trends now, multiple week trends, 3 months straight, prices falling across the US. You know, with that being said, you now have BlackRock CEO Larry Fink comes out and says, hey, I got an idea for inflation. Let's make everybody come back to work in person. Now, you gotta admit, you gotta give it to that guy, because if you read into what he's saying, he ain't kidding. If you make everybody come back to physically work and they own homes in other states and they gotta put those things back on the market, you talk about running down the price of houses. Let me tell you the impact that this could have. In the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, multiple surveys have been done to survey why people moved and how far they moved and all kinds of different details. The statistics show that 35, depends on the survey, I've seen them as high as 36, 37% of people last year moved to get into a new marketplace, to live in a different area because they could, because their boss let them remote to work. Now, multiple outlets have come out recently and said, hey, you guys have to come back to work. You can't work remote anymore. You have to physically show up here. Now, unless these people are buying planes or helicopters, they're gonna be selling houses, okay? This is happening a lot. Now, Bank of America came out recently and said, hey, we're gonna be revising our work policies. Just a heads up, it's coming in a month and a half. Larry Fink is presiding over a $10 trillion hedge fund in BlackRock. Do you know how much ownership of different companies BlackRock has? Like, name it. They probably have a percentage of ownership in it. BlackRock is very influential. You know, when BlackRock says something like this, I'm like, huh, interesting. BlackRock has access to multiple companies. You know they're going to say, hey guys, we think this is a good idea and you should do this for your company too. Otherwise what? We're going to pull BlackRock's stock out? I mean, Warren Buffett did this. Warren Buffett was, you know, the reason why that guy says I invest in companies because I want to invest with people that I like is because he would talk to them and influence them about how to run their business. You think BlackRock's no different? It's an absolute fact that they're going to come in and say, hey, more of you need to do the same thing, which is interesting because Larry Fink's buddies are all doing the same thing. Goldman Sachs just pushed everybody back to work. Now, you got to understand this. Those of you that don't think that inventory is going to make a difference, you're not paying attention, because right now we have epically low inventory and yet all the factors are falling. It's taking longer to sell homes. The supply of homes is going up, even though magically there's not much homes around. Like, inventory is just sitting and aging, and those that are selling are price reducing. Buyers that are buying are getting homes below appraised value because they cannot get sellers cannot get what the last owner got for his or her house. So you're seeing all this change, and we've never seen the market like that. We've never seen such a staticky, slow, low inventory where people literally cannot get their home. You know, you think with you got 10 buyers that want to buy 5 houses, then you know you're going to have a bidding war. But right now you only got 2 houses and nobody wants to buy either one of them. That's what's happening across the country. You already are seeing the West Coast markets getting slammed, okay? West Coast states are already in trouble. California, Oregon, Washington, not so bad Washington, but Seattle for sure. Not statewide, but Seattle for sure. You've got a lot of these marketplaces already starting to see some really bad signs of consistently dropping price. And now, you know, the interesting thing is that this has been epic, but the eastern states weren't doing that bad. You know, if you look at all the 4 regions, you know, usually the housing reports are going to have, you know, northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast, you know, depending on what you're looking at, you're gonna have those kinds of variations across the marketplace. Usually the southeast been hanging on a decent clip, but you gotta understand, this is the real danger. By the end of this video, listen to me, I'm gonna share with you, based on my research, I did a bunch of research, what are the 10 states that are most likely to get seriously ruined if all the relocators move back to the states of which they came from so that they can report to work in person. But one thing I need to ask you for that's cost you absolutely nothing is give me a like on this video. If you appreciate the content, hit the like button right now. It is free and you can take it back if you think the video sucks by the end. Secondly, 90% of you have not subscribed. Hit the subscribe button so you get more updates like the content I'm delivering to you right now. Listen up to me real quick. The marketplace that we're talking about has you know, serious weakness in employment, okay? Now, we got the, you know, the administration, the government's putting out data saying, oh, these jobs are everywhere. We're creating jobs. We're creating part-time jobs, maybe at best. You still have unemployment benefits climbing. You have workers, okay? CNBC just put out multiple, I think Bloomberg covered it too. 50% of employers expect job cuts, survey finds. 50% of large companies in the next year ahead are gonna be cutting people. Now, whenever an employee, right? Because ultimately in the past, you know, right around pandemic, the reason why this whole remote work got started is because of a couple reasons. Number one, we had the Great Resignation. People said, hey, I'm gonna either shift to an employer that's gonna pay me better, or I'm gonna move to an employer that's gonna pay me in a way that I want and give me terms of my job that I want. Well, now you've got mega influence saying, that's over. Okay, so what's happening now is there's a shift of leverage from the employee having control, saying, I want higher wages, I want better terms, to now the employer having more control. That's why you're seeing announcements from Google and Facebook and everybody else saying, hey, we're about to drop people. All the residential real estate companies, we're about to cut people. Why? Because business is bad. Okay, we're heading to recessionary times. They know it. So the employee is now backed in a corner. So if they're backed in a corner, they're not going to quit a job that's actually decent, you know, paying them well. I mean, these people are paid well. But where this is really bad is that this is going to impact a lot of the states that haven't really gone seriously red, like San Jose, LA, San Diego, Seattle. These other states they're definitely falling. They've got a 12-week trend. They've got a lot of negative trends going on where you're seeing the price reductions climb. Sellers are selling below appraised value. That's a commonality now in real estate. People are like, hey, I'm buying way below what the last guy paid. Sounds like prices are coming down. The amount of price drops all across the country are record high, but there's no supply, which means there's no buyers. If there's no supply and no one's putting homes on the market, very little hit in the market, yet inventory is aging, it's going up, prices are being reduced. When I'm saying going up, means there's nothing going pending. So like when you consider, you know, the lack of buyer activity, basically, you know, people are slashing prices to get out. If they're serious about selling, they're having to do drastic things. Buyers are waiting out the seller. But now keep in mind, we're talking about reversing all of the real estate arbitrage that took place in the last 2 years. You realize what that means? That is a direct reversal. All the people that moved into these marketplaces flooded it, then bidded them up, and interest rates at 3 and 4%. And now you're gonna have to go back to work and sell your house to a buyer that's going to have to borrow money at 7%. And by the way, those interest rates are going up, dude. They're going to get worse. In the next 69 days, the quantitative tightening the Fed is doing is going to get worse. Mark it down. Check out my last video if you do not understand why what the Fed's doing is going to kick mortgage rates to another level, and why a 7-8% interest rate is way worse for home buyers now than it was 15 years ago when we last had a 7-8% interest rate. I'm not going to go down that road again, but check out the last video if you're confused on that particular point. But you've got all these buyers that bought these houses, real estate arbitrage. They moved out of their expensive luxury townhome, not even a luxury townhome. I mean, California, New York. I mean, you sell a townhouse or a condo, $1.5 million, something like that. I mean, it's bare minimum, and what they did is they moved to a marketplace like ours, where in Orlando, for instance, you could buy, at the time, a $500,000 house was a big house, a nice house. You could move to Georgia and buy a couple acres and a farm and a pig and all that and live out in the country if you wanted to. As long as you got an internet signal, you're like, I can Zoom to work every day. But now, it's interesting that a lot of this happened in Florida like a year and a half ago. This shift from you have to come to the office to now you can, you're not allowed to stay home. You literally have to come to the office. So with that being the case, it almost seems like the rest of the world just got to where Florida was with COVID, like where we were a year and a half ago. And not trying to be nasty about COVID. I don't want to have that argument on this video. But like Florida a year and a half ago was already like, all right, folks, mask if you want to mask, come to work if you want to come to work, protect yourself at all times, do what you need to do. And ultimately, like, it doesn't feel like we're under a pandemic response for a very long time, okay? But you've got a lot of folks, you got to remember, when you live in an area like New York City or California where you had a much higher strict COVID situation, the people in that area existed in a place where they go to the marketplace and there's little stripes on the floor that tell them how close they could stand to someone when they're in line, and they got to buy whatever, they got to buy a hot dog at the store through plexiglass, and everybody's got like hazmat gear on and stuff like that. When you live in that kind of world, like the people that manage companies in that particular setup in that time, they're going to be way more cautious. They're going to be like, oh, this pandemic is not over. We have to really protect everybody. And honestly, like Florida has been like, yes, we're going to have different things to do to protect yourself. If you want to take these steps, take these precautions, they're all there for you, but we're going to move on with life. Okay. So psychologically, people are really, really, really stuck, okay, in certain areas. And I think that piece of kind of coming out and seeing like, oh wow, the light of day is here again. We're passing the pandemic. Like, I feel like a lot of places have just finally mentally shifted. Now they're like, all right, you have to come back to work. BlackRock, on the other hand, I think their intentions are a little bit more sinister. I mean, these guys, when real estate's gotten so rich for them that they've really cut back on buying houses, like, all you have to do is create policy that basically puts millions of homes on the market in a period of time when no one wants to buy them. And hey, I got some values to buy again. And they got a lot of cash to do it. So it is interesting. It is interesting, the turn of events. And it will be interesting to see what happens with the market. Let me get to the top 10, okay? Because my thoughts, and you'd say, hey, Jared, how did you get to the top 10? Where's this list coming from? I went through and reviewed top cities where census told us remote workers were. I looked at data about volume of movement over the past 2 years. Volume, particularly like how many people really moved into the area from outside of the area, not like internal movement and stuff like that. Because a lot of these large states like Texas, California, like so many people moved, but the state's massive. So like it's obviously going to outweigh a much smaller state. Like looking at every state on its own terms, these are the states that I think are be most problematic for this particular potential crisis in the market. Number one, Florida. Nothing to say there. Orlando, Tampa, by the way, Zillow called it the hottest marketplace in 2022. Man, that was a bygone article. Texas is going to be a problem. A lot of people came to Texas. North Carolina, same thing. Asheville, one of the top relocation destinations. People that want to relocate move to Asheville. Georgia, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Las Vegas basically, Alabama, Tennessee is going to be a big one, Iowa's already suffering, and a honorable mention, number 11, I'm going to say California. California's already suffering, and I think California is going to suffer worse because it's already in trouble in a lot of ways. Their market is already, so many of those housing markets are already on the red with price falling, stuff like that. There's a lot of people that I believe were in tech companies there that got relocated. They relocated within the state. They took moves. They would say, hey, I could go live outskirts of town 4 or 5 hours away from my job and live with my parents, or buy a bigger house basically in the suburb areas. You got a lot of that stuff happen in Florida. You know, that's a problem. You have a lot of people who A, moved away from where their money is made, and B, took on the king role, the lion's share role of the house, of paying for the mortgage of a bigger house in a city they now have to move away from. And they have to figure out, what are you gonna do with my parents? I now have to move back to New York and take on a $4,000 a month rent for an apartment or whatever, okay? Whatever the situation is, play it out in your head. I mean, this is inventory coming to the market, folks, and it doesn't take a lot. It will not take a lot of properties hitting the market to tip this economy over. And you've got people being laid off, a lot of people are gonna be laid off in the next year, and you've got a lot of people that are gonna have to be selling their houses because they're being forced into doing so. We'll have to see how it plays out. Once again, I appreciate you watching this video. Give us some comments down below. What do you think's going on? There's some other ones I didn't mention I think might have problems. New England area, stuff like that. A lot of you, I'm getting mixed information from your marketplaces. People from LA telling me LA looks good, and I'm looking at the data and it's not saying that. You know, tell me how it looks in your neighborhood. What's going on in your marketplace? Love to hear stories. I'd like to hear from you naysayers. I know you think this is just another clickbait hyped up video, but I'm telling you, the signs are everywhere. You know, it's like, I'm just here to tell you a storm's coming. What you do about your business. A lot of times you guys ask me for updates and data and details from your different marketplaces. I try to get to a lot of those as I can. And once again, hit me in the comments. Appreciate so much your support on all these videos, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.